Hey guys, okay, so my last video was the review of the Inokim Ox, and it was done at 113 kilometers. Now it's a little bit over 2 weeks later, and I've done 423 kilometers. And there's a few bits and pieces that I picked up that I thought I might let you know about that you might find it's mildly irritating, but otherwise the Inokim Ox has been fantastic commuter to work. So give me a sec, I'll flip around the camera. So as I said, there's a couple of little minor things that are a little bit irritating. So I went back to my dealer, and as one person commented on my last video, the locking mechanism here, as you can see, I've got a little bit of a different strap on here now because I have yet to get the replacement. If I take this one off, they're right here. I don't know if you can see it in the video. Yeah, see there's a little bit of hard plastic there. It used to have a little locking clip that used to come across here just to hold this red locking latch in place to stop the this bar from breaking down when you want to fold it in half. But that snapped off. It was quite a rigid, hard plastic, and I was flipping it down one day, and it sort of sits here on an angle, and it just snapped clean off. And as you can see, that will come down nice and easy. So I've just wrapped a bit of Velcro around that until I get a replacement. So that's a little bit irritating that happens. You also get a fair bit of squeak in here in this particular joint, and as you can see, there's a little bit of rubber coming out there because they give you these little rubber shims that go in there, and they sort of break down after a little while, so you can get like this. No, you can't hear it now. I've got it done down pretty tight now, which avoids most of that squeak, but otherwise, yeah, there is a little bit of squeak in there that you need to play around with the shims and tightening it down, and obviously you need to get that new locking latch, which I think is more of a rubberized version that will clip in there, but without snapping off. Okay, so that's the next thing. The other thing is the wheels come with these little dust covers, and as you can see, it's a nice little circular thing that looks kind of cool. But that said, if you do a lot of Ks, and I do about 26 Ks every day, they had a little cap over there, and that's just fallen off. It just allows a little bit of dirt and dust to sit around there, get stuck, so you got to clean that out periodically, which is a bit of a pain in the ass. The other thing is, while we're on dust caps, as you can see on this side, so you can see my bolt, the dust cap has fallen off there as well. The one on the front is still there, but the one on the back has fallen off. So a couple of little bits and pieces. Would have been nice if there was a bit of more of a secure way for those to stick in there, but as you're driving around, they just sort of fall out. So I've lost a few bits and pieces, those little dust caps. Otherwise, in my last video I mentioned about the brakes, and the brakes were a little bit squeaky, but what I found is you undo these two bolts, you can actually slide this whole brake compartment over and get it closer to the fixed end of that brake. So the inner plate closer to the wheel, that's the fixed brake pad. The other one is the one that pulls across. I don't know if you can see that. See, the inner one comes in when you pull the brakes on. So slide it hard up against that inner brake pad, and that'll stop all that squealing, which I was mentioning earlier, which was really frustrating in the last video. While we're back here, see this mud guard, okay? On the mud guard there's a little bit of a join there. For some reason they thought instead of making it a one molded piece thing, they'd make it two molded pieces, and there's some little brass screw like nuts in there, and two little screws that go up in there that you do up. That said, this whole thing's subject to a lot of vibration when you're riding around the road, okay? And those nuts come loose. So I got some epoxy resin, 2-part epoxy, and put it in the screw threads there as well as in between, just to glue that down, and it's since not come loose because I had to tighten that up every week, which is a little bit frustrating. While we're here, I'll see if I can show you. You can see in between the gap, there's not much of a gap. So my finger won't even fit in there, between the back wheel and the back of the housing. And if you can have a look really closely, see those 4 lumps? There's one there, one there, one there, another one just under there, okay? Those little lumps there, I'm not sure what their design purpose is, but what I found is as you're racing along, doing the speed limit, if you ride over, say, like bit of fibrous material or something like that. I've had a couple of times where some of these plant pods have got picked up by the wheel, come around here and got stuck in between here and here just for a momentary second. So less than a quarter of a second, but what effect that does have is it decelerates you. It just makes you feel a little bit unsteady, and if you're whizzing along, it can be a little bit hairy. But otherwise, I have heard some people have ground off those four little lumps. I've only had it happen twice, but I thought I might make mention of it, just so if you're whizzing along and all of a sudden you get run over something and you rapidly decelerate for a quarter of a second, you know what it is. Still got plenty of tread left on the tyres, and again I recommend just inflating those to 40 psi. It's a lot smoother ride than if you have it set at this is between 40 and 50. Have it in 50 and prepare to get shaken to bits on the road, especially if you're going up and down the footpath rather than being on the road itself. Speaking of that, last time in my first review I said it's quite harsh on your, it's good to have the dual suspension there, but it can be quite harsh. What I found is I swapped it over to the upright position. So this is in the higher position now, and it has made a huge difference to the rider comfort because it's just got so much more travel. So this little bit, have a look in there. See there the bumper stop, see this? There's the front of the bumper stop, and there's the rear of the bumper stop. So it's got a small amount of travel, and obviously it's a lever, so that translates to a fair bit of vertical movement. But previously that gap, and see if I can get it a little bit closer. Previously that gap was about a quarter of that size. You can see in between the two bump stops, which meant I was bottoming out a lot when I was going over bumps and whatnot. Okay, so that was a little bit frustrating. So definitely, as soon as you get your ox, I would recommend putting it in the high setting, even if you're just riding around town, because you'll have a much smoother ride. The only problem is, it means a kickstand leans the scooter over on more of an angle than it would otherwise. Okay. Last point I'll bring up is the 2 points. Sorry, the rear tail lights and the front headlights are they're a good little gimmick, and I suppose on pitch black nights they would be helpful, but definitely you need the addition of another light. I know the Segway 9 bots. The Segway 9 bots, they have a much better headlight than this one does, but I just put this $5 job from Kmart on there, and it makes all the difference. I think on the back of your helmet you probably need another red flashing light, because these things don't stand out enough in the dark. Last point I want to bring up is the cruise control. I don't know about you, but I've tried the cruise control on this, and it's a great little gimmick, I suppose, but at the end of the day, sometimes you forget that it's on. It only takes half a second just to tap the brakes and it goes off. But it's a bit dicky, and it's hard to set if you want to set at an intermediate speed. So just say you've got your top speed set at 25 and you're on speed 3, but speed 2 is set like 20 k's an hour, but you want to do, or like 15 k's an hour, and you want to do 20 k's an hour, you'd have to hold your thumb on the thumb throttle in just the right position, and hold it there for like 6 seconds before it will register that same speed and continue on. And that's easier said than done, because generally the throttle is quite touchy, and as you bump over the road, you lurch the throttle forward, and this thing's got a lot of torque and a lot of takeoff, and it just lurches off on you, and so it's hard to maintain that one speed unless you've got your thumb all the way down and you're at that set speed. You know what I mean? So I found it of limited use, and it's a little bit frustrating, so I've turned that off anyway, but you might like it. So hopefully you enjoyed that review, and yeah, cool beans, have fun. So just to add to that, the Inokim Oxo, however, in the last 400 and nearly 30 k's of travel, is still a beast. It's still got awesome acceleration, excellent capabilities as far as climbing up hills, better than any other model on the market as far as I know. And again, the 800 watt brushless motor, it has a peak power of 1300 watts when you're going uphill. So when you really need that extra power, it kicks up to 1300 watts of available power. and it's the brushless motor part. It makes a huge difference. There's a couple other scooters kicking around. I think they retail for about $600 or $700. They're fairly cheap, and you can buy those on eBay, and they reportedly are about 1,000 watts. I don't know how accurate that is, but you can hear them going past when they pass on the bicentennial bikeway, going the other direction, and they're chain driven, and they're quite loud and noisy and just rattly, and I don't know how long they will last, whereas this one, being brushless, is quite sufficient. It's got loads of power. So all in all, apart from those few little problems I mentioned, it's definitely a scooter worth getting if you're looking at a serious commuter and you got to do some serious distance, or you got some big hills in your way. This thing, like I said in my last video, will go up a 45 degree slope without stopping. So, and most of the hills at the back of Indooroopilly, which some of those around 35-40 degrees in spots, I'm powering up at 30 kilometers an hour. 25 kilometers an hour. Okay, so no dramas. Hopefully you enjoy it, and yeah, get out there, get one.